Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome. This is Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio, and I'm joined by Sensei Andrew Corbin. We're both laughing about that. You're not even going to know why. That'll be an inside joke with us. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. What do we do at Whistlekick? We connect, educate, and entertain in our efforts to get everyone in the world to train for 6 months. For those of you in the audience, if you're new to what we do, please go to whistlekick.com, see all the things that we do. And while you're over there, you might jump on the link or maybe punch it in yourself to whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. So we're going to find everything for this and every other episode. But Sensei Andrew, thanks for being here.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Yeah. So the first thing, and the folks that are listening are going to miss out on this, but I'm going to guess it's fair to call you a nerd based on your hat and what is behind you. Is that
very much so, yeah.
A badge you wear with honor?
Very much, yeah. No, I like to kind of pride myself as, I want to say that I like to kind of break stereotypes. I have been I've been practicing martial arts since I was 9 years old, and I've been, one would say a jock. I was doing, I was doing soccer, and then on the off season for soccer, playing varsity soccer. On the off season, I would play basketball because my high school allowed that. But at the same time, I was watching anime, and I've super King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, Arthurian nerd, and Lords of the Rings and Tolkien, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I definitely am on all of those spectrums.
Now, we've had plenty of people on the show for whom martial arts is a nerdy pursuit. Did your nerdiness predate your martial arts? You said 9, so that's pretty darn early. Were you a nerd before that?
So interesting, probably how I got into martial arts in particular. I was born in 1985, so as you know, around that time period, the Karate Kid movie came out, right? So actually, probably one of my earliest memories was watching the I don't know if it was a commercial or what, but the wax on, wax off, probably. When we only had 3 channels back in the day.
And one of them you had to stand by the TV, depending on where you lived.
Oh, yeah.
If you lived in Maine, in the woods of Maine, like I did, 1 or 2 of those channels, you had to hold the rabbit ears for it to come in.
Yep. Yeah, back in the analog days, before the TV signals turned digital. But there's 2 memories in particular. There's that, but there's also watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And so I don't know if you know too much about them turtles, but
I do.
one of a really interesting character is called Usagi Yojimbo, which is he's a rabbit, but he's also he's modeled after Musashi, right? The greatest swordsman of all time. So yeah, I was interested in Robin Hood and Arthurian legend and knights, and I guess that kind of medieval stuff translated over to my interests in Japan, and then martial arts was just kind of went hand in hand with all that.
Yeah, it's a story that we've heard a few times. This idea that childhood environments create a passion for understanding and learning something. And spoiler alert to the audience, you're in Japan. It's late. Thank you, by the way, for your willingness to do that. But we've heard about that from a few folks.
You guys are in Eastern Standard Time, right? EST?
Yeah.
So yep. I think because of daylight savings time, I think that kicks me 14 hours ahead of you guys.
Yeah, that would. That's what if it's 1:22 there.
1:22 a.m.
Yeah, so it's 14 hours. Actually, the last conversation I had, I don't know if they're going to come out in this order, but I talked to someone from Okinawa just a few hours
Yep.
ago
Yep.
for the show. So apparently, it's International Day here at Martial Arts Radio.
Hey. Well, I mean, what, as Jesse Enkamp likes to say, right? Okinawa, the birthplace of karate.
Hmm, right, exactly.
Which he's
Okay,
not wrong, which is actually
he's
really
not.
interesting.
No, he's yeah. Jesse's great. Jesse's been on the show. I think the world of him and the content he's putting out. I mean, he's about as prolific as you get.
Oh yeah, no, he's one of my favorite martial arts YouTubers.
Nice. All right, so you're 9. So actually, let's go a little bit before that. You're 8.5,
Sure, sure.
and what is it that happens that because if you're 9, you're probably not bringing yourself to karate class.
Nope. Nope.
A parent, somebody had to get involved. What were the conversations? What was it that led you from I love Ninja Turtles to I'm doing martial arts?
Well, I think like it was. I think it in particular. I think it was the Karate Kid 2, like when
Mhm.
they went to Okinawa, right? And so like you were able to kind of see like it hit culturally like a lot harder than the first one, because I mean the first one is what he's a suburban kid in what I think it's a Jersey, right?
From
And
Jersey to California. Yeah.
right, yeah, and then but like you don't really get that cultural aspect until you like they actually go to Okinawa, until they go to Japan,
Right.
right? So
They
I
hint
think
at
like
it with the T.
yeah, right, right,
Miyagi brings a little bit of that, but and yeah, and they definitely continued it with the second one.
right. So yeah, I think like that my father is probably one of the biggest history buffs, American history buffs
Mm.
that I've ever met, and I think like that love of history kind of translated over. But like when you look at American history compared to world history, America is a very young country, right?
Sure.
So like and like we didn't have medieval knights, we didn't have like a well, I guess in Japan they call it Sengoku Jidai, which means like it translates to like the warring area or the warring period, right? So that's when they had like shogun and samurai and ninja and all those kind of mythical figures, right? Well, I mean, the United States didn't really have that. So
Right.
for me, like that kind of like opened up, like my father's love of history kind of translated into me, and then I kind of deep dived into history and culture of like Japan and things like that. Yeah, but kind of circling back, right, to your actual question. So when I think yeah, we saw Karate Kid 2, and I was like, okay, you know what, I want to do martial arts. I want to do karate, right? And
Hmm.
my father, he one of his friends, his day job was a corrections officer at New York State, in the New York State penal system, and then he would teach um, karate or I don't know. This is also this is something that kind of bothers me, right?
Hmm.
Because I have become kind of like a linguist, and my day job is I'm an educator, right? I teach at university.
What do you teach?
I teach well language, so
Mhm.
English, but as I also teach, I do a MBA course at the university out here.
Okay.
So yeah, my background is in business, and so I did like my graduate studies on international relations
Oh, okay.
with a focus on like finance. So like talking about the United Nations, but specifically like their economic branches.
Yep.
So yeah, I did
Okay.
my undergraduate on business and public administration, or what has now become, I guess, like a BA, business administration. But when I was doing it in 2007, 2008, it was called BPM, or business and public management.
Hmm.
So yeah, I did that, and then what I minored in computer science, and then but when I was in 2007, I studied abroad here in Japan and said, okay, you know what, I want to come back. So after I graduated, I got a job here. A couple of years, I focused on learning the language, and then I enrolled in graduate school, and then I started, or I guess I got a job as an adjunct professor at the university that I went to. So
Mm.
that's how that went. But yeah, so my first sensei, actually, his name was Sensei Ratton, Hugh Ratton, in upstate New York, and he was actually teaching at the time. His first quote unquote dojo was in his grandmother's garage. So he had kind of like he had like a bag in the corner, like a punching bag,
Hmm.
and he had laid out like some like foam mats and stuff like that. So he had kind of retrofitted his grandmother's garage into a makeshift dojo. And so I think when I was not his first student, but I think like when we were studying at that location, I want to say I think like because I think it was like space wise, he never had more than like five students at a time.
Hmm.
I want to say something like that. And then as his dojo got bigger, and his business got bigger, he moved into the town, and he found a space in town, and then actually he found a bigger space, and then yeah, so he was doing really well. Um, like in I want to say probably like the martial arts boom, which
Hmm.
was what like early mid '90s.
Yeah, that early to mid '90s time, there was a lot of expansion.
Yep. So yeah, my first sensei was Sensei Ratton, and his little brother actually went to Okinawa to learn uh, karate, right? So yeah, and like I said, like his day job was he worked as a corrections officer, right? Which is
Hmm.
it's more or less right a policeman that works inside of a prison. So like he knew what he was doing. he wasn't it wasn't a quote unquote McDojo, which I think I was just really really lucky because there had to have been like so many of them, like
Where in New York? I'm in Vermont now, so where in upstate New York are we? East or west? We're talking about.
Central, actually.
Okay.
CNY, yeah. If you
Okay.
wanted to like draw a line right from like Niagara Falls to New York City, it's
Hmm.
more or less in like that middle, that
Got it.
exact middle bit. So yeah, a lot of people don't really realize, but New York State is pretty huge. So like
It's a
we
big
have
state. As anyone who's ever, once in a while I have to drive from Vermont to, you know, out Syracuse way.
yep
It's
yep
a very long drive.
yeah yeah. So yeah, I mean, like New York, it has two mountain ranges, right? There's the Catskills and the Adirondacks, and yeah, I was also very much an outdoors, I guess you would call it like a latchkey kid. So my
Mm-hmm.
father worked as an engineer for the state of New York, so he was driving sometimes up to 5 hours one way to go to like his job. But so like yeah, I would get home from the bus. I would like grab my I have one specific memory of like grabbing my Isaac Asimov book and going out in the back field and finding a place like a tree to just kind of sit under and read, and like a deer
Mm,
literally like passing in front of me. And yeah,
nice.
yeah, I lived by
We probably
actually
would have been friends. That sounds similar to me.
yeah
Go home from school and grab a book and go outside.
yeah. And yeah, so actually, my father owned well, one part of what's called the 9 Mile Swamp in upstate New York. So, like, my father's father was a full time farmer, but he
Hmm.
never really had more than like 10 cows at one time. So it was like a small time farmer, right?
Hmm.
So my father, obviously, he got a job as an engineer, but he kept the farm going as more or less like a hobby. So and I like I my father was born in 1944. So I was very much of the old school thinking of, oh,
Mm.
children are free labor. So we would wake up at 5 a.m. to go do chores before going to like eating breakfast
Right.
and getting on the bus to go to
Yeah.
school.
All
But
right. You mentioned something
sure.
as you were talking about early martial arts stuff. There was something as a linguist you said that bothered you. I want to make sure we covered that.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, because right, if you spell out right, karate, right, it's
Mm.
Karate, right?
Hmm.
No, as someone who has studied several different languages now, in what way would it like get someone to pronounce that as karate? Like the Karate Kid, right? When you look at this, I mean, maybe carrot, maybe karate,
Right.
right? So like,
Right.
but like if you heard the Japanese, right, is karate, right? It's three syllables, and the way that the Japanese language works, it's consonant vowel, consonant vowel, consonant vowel. So it's
Mm.
a very um, how can you say uh, the
It's got a cadence.
It does,
Karate.
yes, right. And so like, and actually each one, um, unlike English, which uses like stressed syllables, the Japanese language is very flat. It's very like if you hear someone like say a full sentence, it sounds monotonous depending
Mm.
on the person, right? Obviously, a person can inflect and do things, but like the Japanese language itself is actually quite like orderly. And so
Okay.
like it's actually, so the Japanese language itself is based on five vowels, right? The Roman letters A, E, I, O, U, right?
Hmm.
But it's A is ah, E is e, I is e, O is o, and U is u, right? So it's a, e,
Hmm.
u, e, o, right? And
Hmm.
it's all, and just like Spanish, it's always a, u, e, o. It's not like English where like an a can have like several different pronunciations. It's always
Right.
a, u, e, o. So the Japanese alphabet is actually, it's so they take the first, all right, the first one is the five vowels is a, u, e, o, and then it goes down the list of different consonant sounds that it uses. So it's the
Hmm.
actual here's your Japanese 101, I guess, right? Is it's aiue o kakikuke ko sashisu sesho hahiguhe o mamimui mo rarirure o wa wo un. And then you have like inflectors where if you have a what looks like a quotation mark on it on the character, it changes ha to ba. And if it has like a degree, like uh, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, right? That degree
Hmm.
mark,
Yep.
then it changes it to ha, changes to pa. So, but it's yeah, it's interesting. But the nice thing about the Japanese language is that like Spanish, right? If you see right the a, it's always ah. So it's
Mm.
and then if you see an e, it's e. So it's e. So it's ka da te, right? It's the same, actually. It's really funny. I actually just had was talking with someone today about that, because like a loan word that we have in English from that is act, which is even more funny. It's a double loan word because it's half taken from English, half taken from Japanese, and then now it's considered a Japanese word. But then when you bring it back into English, it's a karaoke,
Oh yeah.
right? But how do you spell karaoke, right?
Karaoke.
So based on what I said, how would you actually pronounce it?
Mm. Kara. Okay.
Yep, because what it does is kara means empty, and then oke
Yep.
is actually short for orchestra.
Mm.
So it's empty orchestra is karaoke, but for some god awful reason, we bastardized it, and now it's called karaoke.
Right. And I mean, those words are all over the place. The
Oh yeah,
one that always gets me, and I say it myself, and it drives me nuts when I say it, is the word probably. Most of us leave out that extra syllable. We say probably.
mm-hmm. Or you know,
But
if
we know
you're
how to sell it.
if you're in
How to say it,
If
how to
you're
spell
in New
it.
York, right? Like during my college and high school days, we just say probably.
Right.
P
Right.
R
It
O
gets even
P R
shorter.
O L L Y. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
You gonna
Yep.
go? Probably. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's so you end up with, and I'm sure you've spent more time studying this than I have because I've spent none, but I've spent some time thinking about it. The difference between written language and spoken language over time.
Mm. Oh God, yeah,
And
I love one of my other nerd paths is I love etymology. So like the
mm,
origin of words, and Japanese in particular is very fun because they have three writing systems, right? The one is
mm,
like the kanji, right? The is actually
mhm,
pictorial based, right? So like each one, the origin of the word has an inherent story because on how
mhm,
that character was formed originally, obviously from in China. But yeah, it's really interesting.
mm. Okay. So we've covered one of your pet peeves, and I'll do my best not to call it karate for the rest of
Nah,
our
it's fine.
conversation, but
It's not a big
I
deal.
will likely slip.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
All right. So
Well, and
go
like
ahead.
this is something too, right? Because it's so ingrained in us, right? If I hear like someone call it, oh, like the Karate Kid, it just sounds weird to my like that's not the movie. It's the Karate Kid, right? It's very funny. If you want to like look back on the series with Friends, right? Ross, right? He takes karate, right, where he kind of inflects like the he puts the stress
So
on the
does
K.
Kramer in Seinfeld, right? They put
Yeah,
the inflection on that second syllable.
yeah, it's called right karate. It's like no, it actually it's pronounced karate. It's one form. Yeah, yeah. When people want things to sound Asian for some reason, they put that stress like on that middle syllable.
Right.
But anyway, it's interesting.
But we delve into all sorts of elements of nerdism here because there's a large overlap between martial arts and people who are passionate about things that maybe are a bit unconventional. Of course, in the modern landscape, that's changed a bit. Uh, Being nerdy is a bit more acceptable than it was when you and I were growing up. You know, I've got a couple years on you, but not much,
Mhm.
and it's been a nice change to
Well,
see that.
I mean, to be quite fair, I mean, like this is why like I love this shirt, right? It says right, we don't
Mm,
play karate, right? We practice, we
right,
study, we don't play karate. We don't
right. It's a
play.
karate combat shirt for those of
Yeah.
you who
Oh
are
yeah, karate.
listening.
Yeah, karate combat. Yeah, and but yeah, I mean, like, then that's something that I think also like my sensei, like, really instilled in me as well. Is that like
Mm,
the martial arts, like when you start learning martial arts, right? It's yes, there is a sport aspect, but and this is where it gets interesting in Japan, is because in Japan now there is like a straight, like down the middle faction, right? There's sports
mm,
karate, and then there's what's called budo karate, or like self defense, or traditional, or budo actually translates into like martial arts. So like the bushido, right? The bushido
mhm,
samurai code. It's the same character for bu, right? And then do means way, right? So budo. So it's the way of bushido.
mhm.
So budo karate is martial arts, or like self, what we would call like self defense karate, as opposed to like WKF or Olympic karate, right? That kind of stuff. Like when you aim for points, it becomes a sport, right?
Right.
When you're actively defending yourself, it's martial, right? The etymology, right? Martial
Mhm,
means, right, you are using your hands and you're ready for combat, right? And it's an art, right? So you study art, you practice art, you become better at an art, you hone art, right?
mm.
So that's the way I like to think about it.
Sure. Now, here in the U.S., and not a secret to anyone, we have schools that are sport, schools that are traditional, but most of them have elements of both.
Mm-hmm.
most martial arts schools, maybe competition isn't a focus of theirs, but they acknowledge it. And, if a student's going to go, they might help them get ready.
Mhm.
Is that the same in Japan, or is that line
So
very dark?
that's what I mean, right? These sports karate, right, dojos, they only focus on how
Hmm.
to score a point, right? So
Okay.
like and I don't know if you know like WKF rules, the rule set or anything
Mhm.
like that, but it's
The
very,
surface.
but it's very, um, how can I say? To score a point, you need to check certain boxes, and you need
Mhm.
to check them enough where the referee, right, acknowledges the point, right, red or blue, right. So basically these dojos, um, yeah, I mean you still get that foundation, right, because like you need to be able to know how to punch, but like if they were in if these like black belts, right, um, were in a situation where they needed to defend themselves against an attacker, like you get a point, and then you wait for the referee. That it's not really self defense.
Right.
So
And I think, yeah, it's. I mean, that's a subject we could probably spend a lot of time on, but I don't. My gut tells me that's not the place where we
yeah,
should go.
it's all good.
Um,
But yeah, that's
so
why
tell
actually
us,
like finding
yeah.
a dojo, a self defense, like one that I would like consider like close to like the dojo that I grew up in, right, in Japan is actually kind of difficult outside of Okinawa. On mainland Japan,
Mm,
right, outside of Okinawa, it's almost entirely sports karate because
mm,
when they brought karate from Okinawa to mainland Japan, right, what is it, Funakoshi Gichi, right,
mhm,
and he founded right Shotokan, right, and
mhm,
Shotokan karate is the rule set that then they're kind of like the organization that is polices the WKF and stuff like that, right?
right.
So my particular lineage or style or whatever is called Goju-ryu, right? So Go,
Mhm.
right, means hard, Ju means soft, and Ryu means style, right? So it's the style of hard and soft, right? Which actually Goju-ryu was one of the first recognized styles of karate, which is kind of interesting little bit. I actually have a book I'd like to recommend. It's
Yeah, please.
well, here actually one of the authors, because there's three of them, is Koyama Masashi, and so he is one of my senpai, right? So
Oh, cool.
in Japan, right, senpai kohai, right? There's upperclassmen, lowerclassmen. There's senpai literally means someone with more experience. Kohai means
Mhm.
someone with less experience. So yeah, so this person, right, or this karate practitioner, and he is one of the kind of leading the charge of like trying to get um, karate, non-sports karate being taught in Japanese schools,
Mm.
which is really interesting. So yeah, so this is actually put out by the Nippon Budokan, right, which is the
Okay.
governing body of all martial arts in Japan, in Tokyo. So this is like
Mm.
the official karate book. But yeah, so and yeah, so he when I have trained with him, it was when I was doing my graduate school work. So
Mm.
he was a an alumni of the karate team because it's treated like a sport in Japan, right? So like how a university has a baseball team, the university also has a karate team.
Mm. Okay. All
So
right.
yeah,
I want to. You mentioned the difficulty in finding the type of school that you want. And I want to talk about that because I want to talk about the type of training that you're doing now. But there's a kind of an important piece to your journey that we haven't gone over, which is how did you end up in Japan?
Oh, fun. Yeah. So I again kind of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was that started the journey, and then I want to say when I was in fifth grade, right? My geography teacher, she was a what do you call that? Um, when host family, right? So
Mm-hmm. For an
her
exchange.
family was hosting a Japanese exchange student, and so
Cool.
because she was a teacher, she forced this poor Japanese girl to give a presentation about Japan to her, world geography class. So that was probably the first time that it kind of clicked that like when you're a kid, right? Chinese, Korean, and Japanese, those three in particular, they look so similar that you you know, and in that how can I say uh, less culturally educated time period,
Mm-hmm.
like it, a lot of people would say like, oh yeah, no, they're Asian, or at the time I think it was the term was, oh, they're Oriental, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they just grouped them all together. But I think that was probably the first time that it clicked that like, oh wait, Japan and um, China are different. And so like from there, I want to say it was in high school that I discovered anime, which yeah, again, so anime. The correct pronunciation is anime because it's the a sound, but
Ni me.
yep,
Okay.
got it. Um, see, you can pronounce it much better than probably about 70% of people who call themselves an otaku now. Good for you.
Well, I'm a quick student. I like to learn. I mean, to the audience, I mean, did you know you were going to get a lesson in Japanese linguistics today? Probably not. But here we are. Bonus.
That being said, though, I think like for me personally, that's one of the things that there's a debate on like whether you need to study Japanese or use Japanese in karate dojo.
Mm,
I'm of the mind that you don't have to, but you probably should. I was like, if you don't understand the history of what you're learning, right, it loses a lot of like the actual meaning. It to me personally. So like one of the reasons that I think um, I still identify as like a Goju-ryu practitioner as opposed to like a non-denominational, right, karate practitioner. um,
I like that.
I like to draw parallels, right? So um, I would say martial arts has a very spiritual aspect, right? I mean, you're dealing with
It can.
in
For a
like,
lot of us, it does. I would include myself in that.
right. I mean, it's all about. I mean, um, when my professor, or not professor, when my sensei, right, Sensei Ratton was teaching it, he was saying, it's a lot of like give and take, right? It's a lot of like
Mm,
you're accepting this energy and then you're like refocusing it and putting it
mm,
in a different area, right? And like if you want to think about it that way, it gets very academic because like you're using Newton's laws, right? The I think it's
yep.
what the third law of motion, right? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And especially like when you're practicing Goju-ryu, right? The way that I was taught anyway was that, right, because you have hard and you have soft, right? So you when someone is attacking you with soft, you defend with hard. When someone is
Mm,
attacking you with hard, you defend with soft, and it's kind of like a cyclical kind of thing. And but then you also kind of get the kind of and especially I want to say like yeah in the 90s in particular, like when the McDojos were ruling the American countryside and suburbs, right? You had a lot of these kind of hippy dippy like dim mak, or like I
mm,
can like kill you with one touch, or like I can manipulate my key in such a way that you blah blah, or like that kind of stuff. So you get a very kind of religious aspect, right? And you can hit, and in religion you have different denominations, right? And I
Hmm.
think karate is a very similar, where like you have some people who say like, oh, right, no, kyokushin is the best, or no, right, shotokan is the way, or um, like even in goju-ryu, right? They have different styles of goju-ryu. Right? There's like meibukan, and then there's IOGKF as opposed to TOGKF, which
Hmm.
I don't know if you've been following that interesting
I
controversy.
haven't.
That is a rabbit
I
hole I could go into for quite a while. But yeah, it's interesting. It's one of
it's
the most exciting developments in karate on the world stage in the last like probably 30 years actually.
well then let's if
Sure,
that's
sure, sure,
important to
sure,
you, let's spend a few minutes there, and then we have to finish how you got to Japan.
sure, sure, sure.
You're
Yeah.
good. You're good at dropping the cliffhangers.
Well,
You're
as I
keeping
told
people
you,
engaged.
right?
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Kevin Smith and his kind of storytelling, and it's like, well, to tell you this story, I need to tell you this story, and then an hour later, he's like, okay, that doesn't really answer your question, but to answer your question, there, right, kind of thing, right? So, really quick, right? So, it for me, right, I like to say that I have three books in my Bible, right? The first one being right this book, right, which
Hmm.
is probably, I would say it's probably the definitive book on karate, its history and practice, because it takes it.
And to the folks listening, we'll get that linked in the show
Sure,
notes.
sure. So like the contents, that the first, it's separated into different chapters. Chapter 1 is Okinawa, chapter 2 is the Kanto
Hmm.
region, chapter 3 is the Kansai region, chapter 4 is a post-war period, and then chapter 5 is a special roundtable discussion that was done with all three authors and like a
Hmm.
moderator, right? So that's the first book in my Bible. The other two are actually volume 1 and volume 2 of this particular book, right? Which this was is actually published by the it's called the Goju Kai, right? Which the Goju Kai is the governing body of the sports karate division of Goju-ryu, right? So the Japan itself is separated into different islands, right? So the
Hmm.
main island is called Honshu, and then Okinawa is one set of islands, right? So in uh, outside of Okinawa, the Goju Kai kind of like they handle all of the bureaucratic BS essentially. So like when you have testing procedures or things like that, right? They like when you want to advance in a belt or things like that, right? They are the ones like they're like, okay, these are the rules, and if you want to be a Goju dojo, you need to do it. But
Hmm.
they're up until two, three, no, maybe even just last year. Yeah, I think up until last year, there were two, technically three, um, organizations in Goju Ryu handling that kind of like bureaucratic BS, right?
Hmm.
What one is the Goju Kai, which is probably the most well known, probably the biggest, because they're the ones that those Goju Kai dojos compete in like WKF and Olympic. Um,
Okay.
it's the sports karate, right? So
Yep.
that's right, Goju Kai, right? And so they published. This is the Japan Karate Do Goju Kai Association Goju Ryu Kata Series Volume 1, and then here's right Volume 2, right? But what I like about this in particular, and like I said, probably one of the main reasons that I still identify as a Goju Ryu practitioner is that it's in Japanese, but then
Hmm.
it's the same thing in English, and
Mm.
so it's a truly like bilingual book, right? So it actually
Nice.
it explains every step in both English and Japanese, So you don't have to like worry, or you don't have to think like, oh well, how is it explained in Japan? This book explains it. And so actually, like
Cool.
when I was in university, right, on the karate team, these two books were the books that the kata practitioners used for competition.
Hmm.
So yeah, and so yeah, so Goju Kai is one of the organizations. The other one is called I'm trying to remember. The international one is the International Organization of Goju Karate Do Federation. So it's IOGKF, right? And the Japan uh, branch of that, right? The original one is JOGKF. So Japan Organization of Goju Ryu Karate Do Federation, right? So this was actually the JOGKF was and IOGKF was founded by a person called Higaona Morio, which is one of the most famous karate practitioners in the world, because he actually studied under the founder of Goju Ryu, which was Tojun Miyagi, right? So
Hmm.
he was he's, I don't know if he is the last living student of Tojun Miyagi, but he's certainly probably
Is one of.
one of the last, right? So
Yeah.
he founded that organization way back, I want to say like in the 60s or the 70s, right? With the permission of Choji Miyagi's family and everything. So like he in almost all aspects, right? He was uh Goju Ryu Karate, right? He was the national ambassador, he was the international ambassador. He was the end all be all of like real, quote unquote real, like Okinawan Goju Ryu, right? And then I want to say probably starting around like 3 years ago, the the administrative people weren't so happy that he wasn't making them as much money as they felt he should be doing, and
Shocker.
so they essentially they minimized his role, and they
Hmm.
said like, okay, yeah, you're gonna be the face, but we're gonna handle this. And he wasn't happy about that, and he's like, all right, well, you guys, I'll start a new organization. I started this one, I'll start a new one. And so that's what this it's called, the TOGKF, right, which is the traditional I think that the O actually stands for Okinawan, right? So it's International Okinawan Goju Ryu Karate Do Federation, yeah, IOGKF, right? And then now, so he started last year the TOGKF, which is the Traditional Okinawan Goju Ryu Karate Do Federation. Whew, yeah, that's a mouthful.
It's a
But
lot of letters.
basically, yeah, he's still active. He still teaches. I don't know if you know this, but I think a couple weeks ago or last month was Karate Day in Okinawa,
Hmm.
and so like he did kata presentations. He had his dojo out, and basically he's
Cool.
like saying to like the his former federation, he's like, "What up, guys? Bring it," kind of thing. So he's like, you guys, you kind of fucked up. You shouldn't have. You like you need to stay true to the roots. And he's like,
Right.
if you're not gonna do it, then I'll burn it to the ground and make a new one. Obviously,
All right.
he's not attacking any of them. He's just like, this
Sure.
is what happened, and if you guys want to follow my new organization and learn the actual like original way of Goju Ryu Karate, then you're welcome to. But yeah, basically he's just like, they lied to you. They said I was incompetent. They said I wasn't mentally
Hmm.
fit to lead the organization, and yeah, that was a bunch of bull. Is basically what he said.
Yeah. There are times I wonder how far along would we be, not just as martial artists or within the martial arts, but also as society, if we didn't do that crap?
Yeah, I
Right?
mean,
I've watched organizations splinter to the point of uselessness
yeah, that's the
because
problem.
somebody wanted to be at the top.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, what do they say? Like ultimate power corrupts ultimately. But yeah,
It's and
so I told you that story to tell you this story. Right? So me coming to
keep it
Japan,
going.
right? So I learned, hey, you know what? Karate is actually Japanese. It's not Chinese. And then at the same time, I kind of learned like, oh, hey, wait, Jackie Chan, he's not Japanese. He's technically he's from, I think, Hong Kong, right?
Hmm.
So it I don't know. When you study international relations, that's a whole hotbed in and of itself. But
Yes,
yeah, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and China, they're not best buds. But
we could have a whole episode on. I mean, pick any two.
yeah,
We could have an episode on
very
that.
much so.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So I was practicing karate all the way up until I went to university, because I had moved away and I couldn't find a Goju, North American Goju karate dojo near my university. I got my black belt when I was 15, so it took me
Hmm.
9 to 15. So it took me 6 years to get my black belt, which I
Hmm.
think is actually like a pretty good time. Like I
Yeah.
think like just saying that, like you can tell like my sensei's right dojo was not just like a black belt factory. It wasn't, you know,
Right.
he was actually trying to teach like martial arts and self defense and
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. And I don't know, I couldn't find a dojo that kind of lived up to my standards, and so I just
Mm.
kind of I fell out of it for a while. So
You're not the first.
2004, um, while all of my friends were, going to like Mexico or Florida or places for spring break, I went to Tokyo for 2 weeks by myself. And this
Oh,
is
cool.
this is pre smartphones. Is pre The iPhone is not even considered yet.
Hmm.
Um, we had flip phones and MapQuest if you're lucky, but internet is not a regular thing. We still
Phone
had
phones
payphones at
now.
that time period, right? Like,
Hmm.
so 2 weeks by myself in Tokyo, and I just loved it. And I was like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna be doing this. I'm gonna be coming back." And so 2007, I was able to finagle my way into a study abroad program, out here in Kansai, which
Hmm.
is like the Osaka, Kyoto, Nara, Kobe. That area is called Kansai. And yeah, so I studied international business, for a semester. Went back, graduated, came back to work, um, here in Kyoto. Basically, like when I interviewed for the job, I said like I'll go wherever you want me to, like for locations, but I want to live in Kyoto. And so luckily
Mm.
they were able to accommodate that. So living in Kyoto, what I was doing was 5 days a week. I was going to language school for 3.5 hours, and then I would go to work after that. And then about a year and a half of that, I burned myself out mentally, and I was like, okay, but that year and a half made it so that I could have pretty good conversation in Japanese, and from there, applied for graduate school and became the first non-Japanese non-Japanese person to take part in and complete the summer training camp of the karate team of that university.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I don't
That's
know
awesome.
how I lucked into it, but that um, that karate team actually their style of practice was Goju-ryu, and I was like, oh no,
Mm.
really? Like, yeah, I did Goju-ryu, and so like I had my mom like take a picture and send an email like with the picture of like my black belt certificate, and
Yep.
the people with who could make the decision said like, oh well, hey, you have a black belt in Goju-ryu in America, you have a black belt in Goju-ryu here. So I was also a black belt, right? Actually, here I can show you. Uh, uh, this is my actual black belt for the university. So it
Nice.
actually so it's Ritsume Kan Daigaku Karate Dobu. So karate dobu means like team or club. So yeah,
Hmm.
and so it has like my name as well, and yeah, so um
Nice.
yeah, I was the first non-Japanese black belt at the on that karate team. I was the first non-Japanese to literally survive the summer training camp because it was 2 weeks. I
Was it
lost.
brutal?
Oh my god, I lost 20 pounds in 2 weeks. Um, yeah, like
Wow.
we basically like we woke up, started training karate. It was karate all day. It was um yeah, there was studying, there was practice, there was
Mm.
talking like with what they call alumni, or like they call them OB,
Hmm.
which is like old boy, or old OG, old girl, right? So like the previous um like the best of the best of previous years came to train
Yeah.
with us and give pointers and things like that. And because I was doing graduate school, I could also drink. So like whenever the alumni like were drinking after practice, they'd be like, Corbin, come on, you're drinking with us. I was like, okay. So yep.
Nice. Yeah. The idea of that style of training, 2 weeks sounds like about my maximum to go that hard, but that sounds like a great time.
Yeah, the only thing is like the last day, right? It was obviously the hardest, right? So I don't know
Always is.
uh what you might call it in the US, and I forget the actual Japanese name, but it is essentially, if I remember it kind of translated to like circle of death. And so what happened was like we everyone of the current, no, actually it was everyone, yeah, so it was the alumni that
Mhm.
wanted to do it, so it was optional for them, it wasn't optional for us, the current year's karate team. So we were in a circle and we went into a horse stance, and we just started punching and counting to
Mhm.
10. And when one person finished counting to 10, it went over to the next person. It went over to the next person, went over to the next person. And around the circle it went for literally an hour and a half. And I
Mhm.
don't know who decided to like finish it, but like they in Japan, right? Well, actually, I guess like in the States too, right? If you have like a football team, you have like a manager, right? Or like a kit man or whatever you want to call it, right? And they
Mhm.
like bring water or whatever, right? Well, we weren't during that time. Um, one of the, I guess it's like a test of sorts, right? Um, so you weren't able to drink water, you weren't able to move, you weren't able to
Mhm.
take a bathroom break, you weren't able to do any of this, right, for this entire time. And we were just lit because we were in like really heavy dogies, and it's summer in Japan where humidity is like 98%. We were just like literally the the managers had mops, and they were just mopping up the sweat, right, going around the circle.
That's so gross.
Now, that being said,
I love it.
right, after that was the best, right? That was the, hey, you did it, right? Congratulations. Like,
Mm.
so they took us to hot springs, and like all of the alumni basically like paid for a super luxurious like dinner, basically like saying like,
Mm,
hey, you know what, summer training's over, you guys suffered, you guys went through it, you persevered, and this is your reward. So yeah,
mm.
it was an experience that I will never forget. It's an experience that I probably never want to replicate. Once was enough.
No doubt.
So
Well,
yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah,
You know, you're talking a bit here about, you're calling it perseverance, but there are a lot of ways that we can look at that style of training, and I'm a fan of it for at some of what we do, right? I think um, when I started training, it was more common to suffer,
yeah.
right? And here we are, we're recording this in 2023. Suffering in a martial arts context isn't nearly as common as it used to be, but I think there's some benefit there, and some of that benefit comes from being able to look at it and use it as a yardstick to say, I was able to endure this, I can now endure that. There's a mental health aspect
Mm,
that's involved
yeah.
to be able to hang your hat on something and say, I
Well,
can get through
I mean,
this.
it's very much I think a product of its time as well. I
Mm,
mean, even like probably like when you and I were growing up, right? The what the catchphrase at the time was what, like, no pain, no gain,
right,
right?
right,
And then, yeah, I mean, like
for sure.
that definitely goes into that. Um, but yeah, going like talking on to your point, yeah, it very much has a mental health aspect. I think, I think martial arts done right, you can't just focus on the physical, right? I mean, very much so. I mean, one of the things you hear all the time is like mind over matter, right?
Mm.
So like, I think martial arts, when it's done best, is you are taking control of your body, right, with your mind. Obviously, it has to be done in moderation, but finding that balance is very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking about this a little bit myself, in that, I had a school a long time ago. I opened a school recently, and, bringing students up from brand new white belts again over the last few months. And it's a lot of fun. But think about this. It's quite common in traditional martial arts training to get into a horse stance for an undetermined period of time. No one's going to say, well, how long are we going to be in horse stance? Or if they do ask that question, they're probably not going to ask it again.
Mhm.
But there are very few places in our life where the outcome is not defined, right? Usually, if we're talking about a different athletic pursuit, soccer, football, basketball, you're going to run the length of the court, the field, X number of times. It might be brutal, but you're still told how much you're going to do that. And even in the context of a lot of martial arts schools, which I don't support this part, but sometimes the end of class can be a little fuzzy.
Mm.
Does it end at 8 or 8:30, or you know if it's the last class of the day, maybe it goes until 9 if the instructor's really on a roll.
Mm.
And so we have to develop that toughness, that whatever word you want to put on it. And I think there's a lot of translation for the way we approach the world. Some it is mental health, or call it other things. And I think there's a lot of benefit there.
I would 100% agree. And I mean, I think for like karate, probably, I wouldn't say it's the only martial art that has it, but it's built into it. The original, like, quote unquote masters, right, from Okinawa, they didn't have belts. They didn't have, um, like, they didn't even really have dojos. They just had, like, okay, this is where we're going to practice, right? And, like, their students, like, didn't know for how long they were going to be practicing one kata, right? They didn't have a specific rule set even determined at that time, right? So I think like karate in particular is was I think like it's one of the reasons that I like to study, literally study about
Mm,
this type of stuff, because like you don't want those kind of traditions lost because they were there for a reason. Now, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be changed or updated, but they shouldn't be just thrown out without good reason. So yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah,
I'm with you. I'm with you.
but yeah, no, I
Talk
mean,
to me
sure,
about.
sure, sure. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna touch back on that mental health thing. I think like um, as well, right? Martial arts in particular, like when it was originally done, right? It was like an apprenticeship, right? Students lived
Mm-hmm.
with the masters, right? So like they were literally like a family, a community, and like that is like if you look at it right, from an academic kind of research point of view, right, that's extremely healthy, right, mentally, right. A lot of us are cut off nowadays, and if we go to a dojo, it's what like for I think probably the majority of people go for maybe an hour a week, something like that, right? I mean, obviously, it's different for.
I'd say the average in the U.S. anyway is 2 to 3 hours per week.
All right, let's say,
Most people
but
go
sure, right,
two
but
days,
so
usually hour-long
but
classes.
even let's say that as well, right? So they're getting right
Yeah.
a camaraderie, right? And probably
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them probably also don't hang out with each other outside of the dojo either, right? So like they're
Mm-hmm.
getting that what 2 hours a week, right? 24 hours in a day times seven. I mean, even so, right? Two like when you're awake, right? Probably if you want to get what like 8 hours of sleep, you're awake. You're awake what
Mm-hmm.
16? I think if my math is right. 16,
Yeah.
yeah, 16, yeah, 16 plus 8 is 24. So 16
Mm-hmm.
hours, right? And then two of those hours is at the dojo and you get that camaraderie. Well, I mean, if you don't have, you know, anything outside of that, right? Maybe you're going home to your studio apartment and you're going to go back to work and you're maybe you don't enjoy work and you don't have a good working like a good relationship with your coworkers, right? So going to the dojo is like your 2 hours a week where you kind of you get that kind of community, but it's
Yeah.
still 2 hours a week, right?
Right. Right. If we take that math, that 16 hours, if I'm doing my math right, it's less than 2% of your time. Your awake time.
Right.
That's it's a small amount.
So yeah, and I want to, and I also think something that was probably more common. Um, I want to say yeah, probably before the internet age, certainly, but was you had kind of more of a community. You had more of like
Mm.
a group of people that you hung out with, or a group of people that you very at the very least that you saw regularly, right?
Mm.
And for a lot of people, the dojo might have been that one of those places. And the sensei, literally, sensei translates to teacher or educator or educated one or however you want to put it, like the person who comes before,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you look at it etymologically,
That's my favorite. That's my favorite translation.
right? And so they're in a position of, I mean, if you really want to put it that way, they're kind of like the patriarch, right? They're a kind of like father figure or mother figure
Mm-hmm.
or however you want to like, put it. Um, but and if they're doing their job right, I mean, they are literally taking care of their students. I mean, look at just like when we were talking about the Karate Kid, right? Mr. Miyagi, he was literally like a father, or at the very least, like a funny uncle, you know. But he wasn't just right his sensei. He was his family. He was his community. He was
Mm-hmm.
the person like when when he was having a hard time and he was like breaking down right mentally or like um when he was having like a crisis of faith or whatever, like, all right, should I continue studying, right? He talked to Mr. Miyagi and Mr. Miyagi consoled him and he gave him advice. And like I think that's I think martial arts is has the potential to be a very positive place.
Yeah. The anecdote that I've given people And, because our mission as Whistlekick, connect, educate, and entertain the traditional martial artists of the world with the goal of getting everyone in the world to train for 6 months. And people say, first off, that's ridiculous. Well, yeah, but I like to set my goals high. Two, why? Why is that the goal? Well, if we work backwards, I believe martial arts makes us better versions of ourselves,
Hmm.
and so we can take that and extrapolate and say martial arts makes people better. And I've with my position, not just in this show, but and not just with Whistlekick, but as someone that people know does martial arts, people come up to me all the time. Oh, I want my kid to train. Well, why? Well, because I did like a year of karate when I was a kid, or 8 months of taekwondo, and it really helped me a lot.
Hmm.
I've never heard anyone say I did 8 months of basketball and it changed my life.
Well, I think it also goes back
But I
to
hear
like
people.
what you were saying before is right. And I don't know. I like the term mental toughness, right?
Mm,
Because that doesn't mean that you're invincible. That means that you're tough, right?
right.
You're able to withstand. Well, that doesn't mean that you will never, right, break down, or you will never need a break or anything like that. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think like you said, martial arts when it's done well, it's it it toughens you, right? It
Mm,
doesn't, but it shouldn't make you hard, if that makes sense.
mm. Spoken like a goju guy.
And I
I
suppose,
like
yeah.
that. I like that a lot.
Mm.
Now, before we started recording, you were telling me you've got a couple social media
Yeah,
channels. Let's share those with
sure,
folks.
sure. So, as you can see, right, my name is Corbin, and I live in Japan. So, I can be found on pretty much everything. Whatever Twitter is calling itself now, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, Facebook. Although I don't really use Facebook for the Corbin in Japan, but even CorbinInJapan.com. But yeah, pretty much everything is all one word, no spaces, just Corbin in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a martial arts specific account that I use mostly on Instagram. Um, but it's Fat Man Karate. So it's on Instagram. Fat Man Karate was already taken, so I had to do Fat Man underscore Karate. But it's that too. That comes from, I mean, as you might see, I'm slightly overweight. Always has been. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Like even at my like skinniest, I've always been bulky, shall we say? So
No judgment here,
no,
my
no.
friend.
But in Japan, like I'm like like uh what's the term? Um, it makes me laugh, but it's not the correct word. It's tragically obese, I guess. It's like in Japan, right? The average person is rail thin, right? So
Mm,
like the you don't get me wrong, there are people who are overweight in Japan. They are not. It's not that they don't exist, but it is very much um, the exception. And
mm.
so like and Japanese people are not shy about saying like, "Oh, hey, Corbin," right? So like, say like we haven't seen each other for like a couple months, right? And it's like, "Oh, you gained some weight." Like they'll just instantly oh yeah, yeah, I went to some barbecues and all, and they're like, well, you know, kind of thing.
All right. And what kind of stuff are we going to see on that account, on the karate specific one?
So the karate specific one, I really like karate combat as a. It's probably
Mm.
my what would you call it? I was gonna say MMA, and I guess it is because there are Taekwondo practitioners as well. So I mean, UFC is great, but I would say UFC is probably mostly BJJ with some stand up. I mean, you have what like Steven
Depends
Wonderboy,
on
but
the competitor,
yeah,
but yeah, there's there's a it's rare that a fight doesn't go to the ground
Yeah, I
and
mean, I
spend some
would say
time
the
there
rule
in
set
my
the
experience.
rule set is probably geared more towards Brazilian
Hmm.
Jiu-Jitsu. Bellator is a bit more stand up, which I like. But it's still, I would say, it's probably geared more towards like Muay Thai.
Hmm.
Um, uh, there's a lot of them, but I would say karate. I mean, as a karate practitioner, um, the like having what I would like to see, um, like a karate competition, like when I was a kid, right? Karate competitions when I was a kid look totally different to
Hmm.
to like the WKF and Olympic rule set. So right,
Yeah.
it's I would say karate combat is probably it took the karate competitions of our childhood and made it more of a formal rule set, which I like. And I
Yeah.
also for
Go ahead.
me personally, I prefer stand up competition as opposed to
Yeah.
watching people hug each other for you know
We tend to like
5 rounds.
watching the stuff that we do,
Yeah, that too.
right? Uh, we rarely talk about things that are topical or kind of time sensitive on this show. We try to keep it what we call
Sure, sure, sure,
evergreen.
sure.
But right
I like that
now,
too. Yeah.
Shannon Hudson, who's been on the show, I've trained with, trained alongside, uh, is preparing for his
Mm-hmm.
debut in karate
Nice,
combat.
nice.
Both he and his brother are absolutely phenomenal
Yeah.
kickboxers. Shannon also holds the distinction of being one of the owners of 9 Round.
Cool, cool.
And so, for anybody out there who's a fan of karate combat, if you're seeing that fight coming, I don't remember exactly what episode Shannon was on, but go check that out.
Yeah, I mean, I was when I went back to New York earlier this year. I met up and trained with El Haj Nidor, Black Magic. He's a
Mm,
karate combat competitor, but he
nice.
also, I think probably like you, but he owns and operates dojos. I think three. I think he just expanded. I think
Cool.
he has a fourth dojo in New York City, and his goal is
Nice.
to basically get kids off the street and like teach them martial arts. And one of his like weekly sessions is at the local police precinct. They
Mm,
let them
love it.
train in the basement of the police precinct. Like so when I went to New York City, I trained with him for a little bit, and we became pretty fast friends. And yeah, I like like we were talking about the kind of camaraderie community.
Mm,
But I mean, so getting back to like what is on Fat Man Karate, the goal of that account is to you know what I remember, like something that stood out to me where at one time I think was a Sammo Hung movie where
mm.
he was at the dojo or whatever, and they were like, "Oh, look at you, you're like you fatty fat fatty," and he's like, "Why?" And they're like, "Well, look at me, like I'm a bodybuilder. Like you want to fight, we can take over your dojo, like, no problem." And Sammo Hung just kicks his ass, and he's just like, "You shouldn't judge a book by its cover," kind of thing.
He is the most underrated martial arts actor of our time, for sure. And I'll share. I don't know that I've ever shared this story. When I was in college, I trained at a Shotokan school, and one of the senior students was part of a kickboxing promotion in town. I went to college in Worcester, Mass, and some segments of Worcester are a little bit rough. And this event was held at a nightclub in a little bit of a rougher area. And I'm sitting there with my roommate, my college girlfriend, and we're watching. And Scotty comes out. Scotty has lost some weight, but at the time was a big boy, a phenomenal martial artist, but a noticeably big boy. And there were some locals sitting behind me, and they made it very known that they did not expect much from Scotty. The bell rings, and the string of expletives that they use to express their surprise at the speed with which he took it to this other guy was it was awesome, because I hear him and I just kind of, because I know him, he was the one person on the card that I knew, and I just kind of poked, my roommate, my girlfriend. I was like, just wait, I know him, just wait. And it was awesome, right? I mean, there are things that are universal in this world. That is not one of them.
Well, I mean,
Larger people can definitely move fast.
like one of my favorite fighters right now is I forget his real name because I'm remembering names, but Beast Boy, the UFC, like he's
Yeah.
big, but he's fast, and like he'll whip like a spinning back hook kick and just take someone out, and because his background is in Taekwondo, so like his feet will just come up and over his head, and like you don't expect that from him, and then like his celebration is to do a front flip and land on his on his butt and be like, what now? Right? It's kind of,
if we're talking about power generation, take a look at Olympic weightlifting.
oh yeah.
I'm sorry, powerlifting.
Sure.
Take a look at powerlifters, and most of them are what the rest of us would probably point at and say they're overweight, but they can move weight. Weight moves weight,
Yep.
and if you know what you're doing, for sure.
Yep. So yeah,
Right.
my goal in creating that account, one was I wanted to focus on karate and like kind of get back into the studying aspect of it. And if you have, I mean, having right one account, like one kind of like catch all social media account is great, but like if you can, what I like to do is I like to take certain focuses and be like, okay, I'm going to kind of compartmentalize a little bit and be like, okay, I want to focus on this for right now, and then so I can like change gears in my head. So if I change my profile over, then I change gears from, I mean, you can kind of see behind me, right? Like the Sega Dreamcast, and you can't see it very well, but it's kind of cut off by the camera angle. But like my holy grail of games over here, let's see if we can't.
Is that the first one?
That is the first one. That's my original copy of Final Fantasy, right, from the Nintendo Entertainment System. Right, so
awesome.
my Corbin in Japan account focuses more on like retro games and living in Japan and all that kind of good stuff. And then the Fat Man Karate focuses more on karate and martial arts and UFC and Bellator, and because I mean, what we were talking about, Jesse Enkamp, right? His brother is a Bellator competitor. So yeah, I like following different people and whatnot, and yeah. Yeah, fun times. I like to share. Number one, I like to share positivity because I figure, one of my favorite quotes I want to say is from a book written by I forget the guy's name. I think he's a doctor. I don't know if it's psychologist or psychiatrist, but he spent time with the Dalai Lama, and one of the sayings was like, I think it loosely, I might butcher it, but it's something like, if you can't help, at least don't harm, right? So and like and I think another quote from that book too was like, gratitude displaces pain, or something to that effect. So it's like if you show gratitude, if you show positivity, you don't have time for, petty BS or like Twitter wars or trolls or that kind of stuff, right? It's like
Totally.
yeah. So I if there's something I don't like, I just don't comment on it. If it's something I like, then I share it. If it's something that I think was interesting and might help, then I share that. Yeah, that kind of stuff. That's the type of stuff that I share more often than not. I don't know if you know this, but was it last month? So November was men's mental health awareness month, or Movember.
Mm.
So every day I shared some either an account or a post or something that I found helpful in my personal mental health journey. Um,
Mhm.
I know originally it was a post that I made on the Karate Nerds Facebook group that I think attracted.
Mm.
I think he's either your co-host or producer or uh,
Yeah,
Andrew,
Andrew.
right? And so he dropped me a line,
Andrew wears many
right?
hats.
Yeah, as do I.
Wears them all
Yeah.
well.
But and yeah, so the post I made was essentially it was sharing my personal struggle with manic depressive or bipolar disorder
Mm.
and depression and anxiety and how martial arts has helped me through that. But in I mean, we touched on a couple of things why I think martial arts has helped me with that.
Mm.
I think yeah, when thing in particular is that I was able to find a community that, and if you find good people, you know, I would say that martial artists are some of the best people, like because um, a lot of them have been through a lot of struggle, right? If you've gone like old school dojos, like what I was talking about, right? My the original dojo, right? Sensei Ratten's dojo. One of my regulars that were there probably three times or more a week. They were ex-cons. They used to be in a biker gang,
Mm.
and martial arts
Mm.
helped them turn their life around. And so, like when we were doing, like defending against someone coming at you with a knife, they were like, "Okay, this is how you do it," because you could tell they had probably had experience with
Because
defending
they've done it.
themselves against
Yeah.
knives. So like we would use
Martial arts is for everyone.
right. So like we would use like rubber knives, right? Realia, and they would be like, well, how you see people hold it in the movies isn't usually how people hold it. Like if they know how to use a knife, they aren't holding it like that, kind of thing. So like they would be like, and oh, this one time, and I'm like a 13-year-old kid, right?
That's
So
some heavy stuff.
right, and I mean, but
Uh,
like you get people from all walks of life, right, and all different experiences, and I think the world is better for that. Like if you're able to, come together, and I think a
mm.
dojo is a great place
I
to do
think
that.
I agree, and I think we're going to have you back. We're starting to run out of time here, and I want to make sure that we're able to wrap up gracefully. I don't want to just cut you
Sure, sure.
off. To the audience out there, if you haven't already paused your video or audio, I want you to go follow Sensei Andrew and
Well, Corbin,
check out what
but
he's got going.
yeah, most people call me Corbin.
Okay, my
Yeah. So
apologies.
it and in
Um,
Japan they use family names, so I would actually
right,
be
right.
Sensei Corbin. Yeah, but that's okay. Yeah,
Sensei Corbin. All right. Well,
it's all good.
thank you for the grace
No,
there,
it's all good.
especially
No
given
worries.
earlier. Go follow Sensei Corbin, and we'll have all this stuff linked in the show notes. But now I'm going to hand it back to
Sure, sure.
you to how do you want to leave things with the audience? What are your final? I mean, sounds a little dramatic, but your closing
Well,
words to
I
them.
mean, if you want to, I could leave it on a bit of a cliffhanger, kind of hint at a story. We talked about it
Yeah.
a little bit before starting this, like when we weren't live. But there's a specific video that I made on my Fat Man Karate account that I posted where last year I had a quite literally traumatic event happen to me, and I would say quite literally, and I'm not using, and I'm using the word literally. Martial arts saved my life. I would say that if I had not been practicing, if I had not practiced martial arts since I was young, I probably would have died, and that's not hyperbole. So that might be a story we could talk about if and when you bring me on next time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we can have you on again. And to the audience, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time, watching, listening, in whatever way, even reading. Remember, we do transcripts of these. Whatever way you're consuming this episode, I appreciate you being here. If you want to support Whistlekick and our mission to connect, educate, and entertain, anything you can think of to do that seems logical would be appreciated. Whether it's you make a purchase, or you share something, or you check out one of our many projects that we've got going around the world. I appreciate you doing that. Thank you for doing so, and we'll be back with another episode soon.